start off by saying this. I would like to start off by saying a special thank you to the number of people that have helped to pull this event together. First of all, to Chief Inspector Mark Rogers and Phil Maunders, who works closely with him from the Metropolitan Police. They will be presenting a little bit later on. And also to Naomi Dixon and Ilana Hutchinson from JWA. Ilana again will be presenting a little bit later as well. And a special thank you to Reshet, especially to Shelley and to Robbie Hoffman for their efforts in putting together a video that you're going to be able to see shortly. And last but certainly not least, a special thank you to wonderful Pages team, and especially to Julia, Caroline and Alison for all their efforts in making this evening happen. When the first time somebody mentioned to me about everyone's invited, I said to them, I don't think that's something we need to worry about within our schools. It showed actually considerable ignorance on my part. I was very wrong. Unfortunately, the stories that we have read about, the horrific incidents that have taken place, the acts of sexual harassment, misogynism, etc., which are an enormous problem across the whole of our society, have without doubt also become a real problem within the Jewish community. And I want to make it clear that this is not something which is school specific or an aspect of a certain element of the community specific. In fact, on the contrary, I can tell you that I have seen evidence of issues and concerns spread across the whole gamut of our community, from the very Orthodox, cross-communal, etc., every single area, and unfortunately, areas of concern within all of our schools. Indeed, that is the reason why Pages decided to pull this evening together and to present this evening, not as a school-specific evening, because this is not about individual schools, but as a community-wide evening, because this is about the whole community. It's a happy coincidence in a way that the portion that we are going to be reading this Shabbat in Shul is about the story of Korach. We're told in that story about the tribe of Reuben. And what is interesting to see is how they were pulled in to the evil of Korach. Rashi, a famous commentator, explains over there, woe is to an evil person and woe is to his neighbor. What we actually see is that the whole of that element of the society was corrupted by the messaging of Korach, to such an extent that as opposed to enabling those people to repent, God actually literally opened up the ground and made them disappear from the nation. Because the evil that they had, the evil they were exhibiting, was such that it would have corrupted the whole of the Jewish people. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us to understand that we are actually facing a very similar threat. The reality is that whilst we may be trying to communicate a certain message to our children, a totally different message is being communicated to them on an ongoing basis. And we see this in so many different areas. We saw this certainly over the last few weeks with regards to the war in Israel, and indeed with the messaging around that and the resultant anti-Semitism. But on an ongoing basis, there is an absolute constant messaging in areas about sexual interaction between people, and in areas about the lowering of the standards of morality from an area or a standard that would be an absolute baseline minimum for all of us, and that is transformed, unfortunately, because of the messaging that our children are receiving. I remember many years ago, somebody telling me how before they gave the newspaper to their children, they would cut out the articles they did not want them to read. And I thought to myself, I'd never do that to my children because that's not the solution. I wish that I could suggest to you that we could cut out all the bad messaging that was coming across in social media, but the reality, that isn't the solution either. The starting point, however, is for us to understand the problem, realize the depth of the issues, and appreciate that nobody is exempt. Just like in the story of Korach, it was all the people around who should have been innocent bystanders, but in reality did not stand up and stop and call out and say, no, this is wrong. I want to just say before I proceed with the rest of the evening, and I will say this at the end as well, there is a danger this evening that we could turn every single boy in the school into a potential abuser and every single girl into a potential victim. That is not what this evening is about. The vast majority of our children, thank God, are neither victims nor abusers. However, what we have got to do is ensure that the culture within our society changes. Because what actually is happening at the moment is that people are behaving in a way which is not acceptable. And those around them, rather than calling them out, are either cheering or allowing, turning a blind eye. So a lot of this evening is going to be about how we all together can affect a change across our community and across our society. This is, as I said, not a school-specific issue or not a community-specific issue. It is about each and every one of us ensuring that the messaging that is emanating from our home will impact our children, the children around them, and ultimately all the youth across our community. As I said, the starting point has to be to appreciate the problem. And we are very fortunate to have this evening a video which has been prepared by some young students, Eden, Sadia, Jess, Talia, Joseph, and Ruben. And I'd like to give a special thank you to Robbie Hoffman for editing this video. We're going to share this video with you now. I would encourage you to listen carefully to what is being said, because by hearing it from them, you will appreciate the depth of the challenge. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this evening.
There's victimhood that comes with everything that as a woman you're not allowed to do. And I feel like in turn that leads to feelings of being robbed of everyday activities that, you know, guys can do without.
Speaking to someone, they was, you know, who's a guy, and they were saying that I was speaking about how I'd be worried walking in the alley at night and someone being behind me, you know, and then they were like, but yeah, so would I. But it's like, no, because we have different things we'd be scared about. You know, you could be scared of getting your phone taken or being robbed, but for us it's very different, and we've been almost conditioned to think that we cannot even be in that situation in the first place. We can't even consider being on our own at night. It's dangerous.
It's higher stakes. Like I remember having one conversation with a boy sparked by kind of everyone's invited, and I was talking with a couple of girlfriends. It's like, yeah, well, after a party, we always text each other when we're home. And it was like that was such an abstract concept for him. Like, wait, you text each other every night when you get home from a plan? It's like, yeah, that's become a daily normalized part of our routine. But I can imagine that if I was a young guy right now, it's a really harsh reality to be confronted with. And it's like, well, if I've never done anything like that, I think it was really hard for lots of people to understand that even if you won't do that, there's still enough evidence for women to maybe act more, I don't want to use the word hostile, but cautiously around you. And it's like, well, that's not fair. I've never done anything like that. Yeah. And there was this struggle to understand, well, to be honest, that doesn't matter to us. Based on stories from our friends, literally statistics we can find online, we're going to do this anyway to protect ourselves. And there was like that kind of disconnect that I think they struggle to understand. I feel like there's just a lack of awareness from younger guys about literally the preventative measures that women have to take on a day-to-day basis in order to avoid all this stuff happening to them. Yeah. You know, like hate against women, sexual assault. There's just that disconnect, that lack of understanding that this is a reality that we face with every day.
My experience of social pressure has always been that I've kind of seen my friends do these things, like, you know, they've gone abroad on holiday somewhere really cool, or they've, like, I don't know, been to like a really cool nightclub or like a really cool party or something, and I've just been like, wow, I don't do any of that. I'm so boring in comparison.
Actually, in my experience, if you're at a party or prees or a social setting and you're offered a cigarette or an alcohol or drugs, and you say no, they'll usually, your decision will be respected. But I think the peer pressure comes not in such an active way, but in a passive way of just being the minority. You're more likely, being the only sober one there it's hard.
A pressure that I had was, you know, just to look like I had everything together, to look like I was in control of my life, to look like just to look stable and to look, and that's not the case. You know, everyone's struggling all the time, but especially with boys these days. You know, it's just double locked, sealed doors when it comes to just being honest with when you're struggling.
Also, another example, I was going on a summer holiday this year, which my entire year group was going on. Obviously, it got cancelled because of coronavirus, but it was the fact that I had to go. Like, I couldn't miss out. I had to go. But I think, looking back on it, I'm so happy that it got cancelled, because I know that I wouldn't have enjoyed it. It's not what I wanted to have done. And relating it to social situations, I think, don't put yourself in a group of friends and in a position that you know you're not going to be comfortable in. There's a difference of stepping outside your comfort zone and being somewhere which you know you shouldn't be. You know that you could be bad influence.
It's really interesting having like conversations with my parents and my parents' friends. Is they're like, in their mind, their stereotypical idea about how peer pressure operates in social settings, it's a bit outdated.
Everybody's going to work the same, and that's fine. It would be really boring if they did. And it's sort of, I like having different perspectives and different personality types in friendship group. And I think it would be not as enjoyable if everybody did the exact same thing every single week and there was no variation.
There is not much I've posted. It's just some of my favourite pictures, and people just don't see the rest of life. They don't see what happens in school, what happens at home. And I don't think it's a problem. I think it can become a problem when everything becomes about social media. So because we're able to, I see my friends at school all the time, and friends out of school, I see them all the time. So we know that it's not the reality.
I would sit there for about 2 hours doing this on my phone, just refreshing the likes and seeing how much can I value my life based on a digital number that I received. And the amount of people that double tap their screens. Like, have you ever? It's so ridiculous that we base our worth off of that. I use social media to kind of, I guess, learn about what other people are doing and to kind of promote my own views and like what I do in my life.
Nowhere else in life do you get rewards so instantly. Do you get appreciation, understanding? It's artificial, but so instantly, and it's an addictive. It's addictive, and what I think is so damaging about that is it makes this mindset, which is so focused on instantaneous release and instantaneous gratification, and then it's so impossible to get up from that and sit down for a few hours and work.
We are able to stay, connected with. I'm able to stay connected to my friends much more, especially through lockdown. Where without social media, not being able to see, at least in the first one, friends for that long would have been awful. But because of social media, we could stay in touch, even if we weren't actually talking. We were, we saw stuff other people were doing on their stories. We were able to have that level of connection.
I'm being traumatized when I would, not be invited to a social event, and I had to find that out because, you'd see them getting in someone else's car or something like that. The idea that, you're just constantly seeing it, and then it's, I don't know, there needs to be some serious action and quick, because, these kids have got no chance otherwise.
If I try and go on social media to make myself feel like less alone or less sad, I'm not going to come out feeling any better. I often feel that like social media is just kind of a mirror to whatever you're feeling in the moment.
I don't remember any circumstances of online abuse or cyberbullying, but what I have seen and what I think everyone sees all the time is anti-Semitism and I'm sure and Islamophobia online. People commenting stuff that they really shouldn't be posting and they wouldn't say in person.
The thing that I've seen recently is that it will be a completely innocent video. It could be a cooking video, and you've got a comment saying Free Palestine. Like, it's so unrelated that it becomes so political. And I think that having a young child in that social climate can be really, it's scary. It's a scary time. I think not just Jews, but I think for all people, just general bullying and general hate comments are just so unnecessary.
I think it can be a huge, boost to your morale. But then again, if you post something which, you know, I don't like saying this, but you're young and you shouldn't post it, and that goes viral, then that can have a real lasting effect on you and on your mental health.
There'll be a massive difference between me as a parent and our parents, because of course there's that generation gap, that cultural gap, and you know everyone likes to think that their generation is different, but I do believe that our generation is like this new culture that our parents can't really empathize with. And I think with my kids, I'll be able to speak from experience and just tell them from the very start. Listen, I loved it. I loved the social media. I loved it, but it had its toll on me, which I would not have wanted on anyone. You know what I mean? So parents these days, I think their job should be, from the very start, before kids get overly exposed and overly desensitized, to just holding that message.
Good elements to social media as much as there are bad ones, because I think it's kind of a reflection of humanity, and humanity has just as much good as it does bad, arguably.
Always knew I was a bit of an outsider within the community and all the other kids that I'd be with when I was younger in primary school and at the beginning of secondary school. And I always knew that I wasn't the same, like I didn't hang out with boys like the boys did, and I was always had girlfriends, and I wasn't doing football, I was doing other things, and I was always just a bit different. When something's not spoken about, it automatically becomes wrong.
Yeah.
Or when something's ignored, it becomes wrong. So I think not being taught about it and just being taught that men marry women and you grow up and have kids and that's what's right, everything else automatically becomes wrong and bad. So in my mind, I was just like, I'm never going to be able to live a normal life. Like, I can't let this happen. And it was honestly petrifying. I remember seeing someone who was much younger than me. I don't remember where. I think I was at a dinner party or something, I'm not sure, talking about how they were gay, and they were so open about it. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, if this person at this young age is talking about it so freely and openly, like, why can't I? And that was my first, I think, encounter with someone who was like me firsthand in person. From my same sort of background, I was like, okay, so this could be a thing. This is realistic for me. It's not something that's completely out of the ordinary.
It's funny how it literally takes one person. It takes that one small bit of social support, and you feel like you have the complete confidence to break out of these norms. It literally takes one person. Yeah. Because
I think that particular night was the night that I set in stone that I was gay, because I think before that, I was never really forcefully in my mind, I am this, and I have to accept it, and I'm going to have to deal with it and find a way around it. Except for that night, I remember thinking, I'm going to come out because I am this, and I've only accepted it just now.
Yeah.
At that age, you believe that your parents do no wrong, and you believe that they're little superhumans.
Yeah.
So you think, if they're going to say no to this and this is wrong, what can I even respond to that? Because you think they are all knowing when actually they are also human. And I remember telling my twin sister, which was amazing, but I always knew she would always be accepting. And then I told my older two sisters, which was also amazing. But obviously you're always nervous for the parents, because they're the overriding factor of whether you feel accepted, and that's where your at that age as well, that's where your main love comes from. So I came out to them the next day, and they were awfully accepting, of course, like they were completely fine about it. But I do have to say they have definitely come a long way since then. I think they've definitely grown as people. I think as being part of an Orthodox religious school, it definitely plays a part. Everything in the community is off of appearance. Everything is, as much people say it's me, my connection with, but it's also actually my connection with the community of rabbis and everyone else who plays a part in it, because it's your life. Your community is your life, especially when you're on this one. And I think it was hard for them to explain to other people, because they also had never really been around anything like it, and it was hard for people to understand why they accepted me. For some people as well, a gay son was firstly a snowball that they never ever thought was going to come towards them. I think as parents, especially in this community, you never think that will happen to you.
Yeah.
And you just don't really ever think about it. And I think that for them was quite a shock. And it made them more accepting as people to different cultures and communities, and just more open-minded. I think something that's common in the Jewish community is to believe that it's a choice. And once you sort of wrap your head around the fact that it's not a choice and it's something that's actually who a person is that they can't decide, I think it'll make it a lot easier for a lot of parents to understand.
Thank you very much for that. I think that was a really important insight into the way that people are feeling. And I suspect that we could hear these teenagers too often. We don't get an opportunity to actually hear them. Too often we don't get an opportunity to actually hear them directly. So this is just a little window into that. It's with great pleasure I'm now going to hand over to Ilana Hutchinson. Ilana is an expert in this area, and she works for JWA, and I thank you very much for joining us this evening, Ilana.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Okay, can we all see that? Yeah, I think you can. Let me know if you can't. Hi, lovely to be with you this evening, and thank you to Pages for bringing our community together to talk about these really difficult and tricky topics. And following, I think I want to just start following from the horrific murder of Sarah Everard back in March, where we saw an overwhelming sense in the UK community of people, everyone wanting to talk about the issues of sexual harassment and women's safety. And lots of women were very vocal on social media about why should it be down to women to worry about safety, and can we not educate the men? And following on from that, we saw the website Everyone's Invited, which is a website, for those of you who don't know, where young people wrote down, or any age actually, wrote down their testimonies of when they had experienced sexual harassment in school settings and also in university campuses. And we know that the Jewish community is like everyone else, where we are not immune to these issues, not only because some of our schools were named and our university campuses were named, but we could really see how widespread this issue is, and can we do something about it? And I feel that there's over 100 people here on our Zoom call tonight. We're all going to either know somebody has experienced some form of harassment, or could have experienced it ourselves. Yet we can all be part of a solution. And that's what we want to come and talk together today about, is talking about a culture of consent, where we can all be part of a solution. And I know that schools are working really hard. And what we have seen in the last few months when we're working with schools, we've seen that they're really trying to provide spaces for young people to talk, to let their teachers know what's bothering them. And we can see from the video that we've just heard now what is bothering young people, and how can we support that. And schools can do a great job. We're specialists in this particular area. We can do an okay job, I think, when we go into schools and educate young people, but it needs to we need to do more, and it needs to come from the home. It needs to come from parents, and it needs to come from the whole community if we really want to see a cultural shift and a cultural change. So what we thought we'd do is I spend sort of the next 15, sort of 20 minutes outlining some of the things that we go into schools to discuss, some of the issues. Maybe we're going to look at some of the root causes of violence. And then hopefully we'll get a chance to look at some practical tips and tools about what we as parents can do to support our young people and to navigate their way through this really difficult time of being a teenager. And hopefully there'll be tons for questions at the end. So let's get started talking about consent then. So what I care about is how are young people, how do they learn about consent? Where do they get their messages from? How do we teach it to them? So I guess for a lot of young people, we're talking about consent. We start talking about consent formally, I'd say year 6, year 7, and often schools show them this analogy, this T for consent video. Great video, okay? If you haven't seen it or haven't heard about it, it's a great video. It basically uses analogy. If you want tea, you have tea, say yes please. If you don't want tea, say no thank you. You don't force feed somebody tea. You don't give tea to somebody who's asleep. And also you can change your mind. If you want to do one day, now you've changed your mind an hour later, great. So it's a great, cute video, really memorable, really funny, really engaging, and it's a great way to start conversations. However, my issue with that tea video is that if you have young people and they're getting to sort of year 9, year 10, and if their only consent education is watching a video about tea, there's something going wrong here, and that this is just not enough. The problem with the video is that it just talks about communication skills. And yes, consent is about communication skills, absolutely, but it's more than that. And this video doesn't really take into account power dynamics and gender stereotypes that are already at play when young people enter relationships. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. It also doesn't it doesn't mention that whole, if someone's feeling pressured to have sex, and that it doesn't really take into account that person who has sort of said yes to having some sort of physical activity taking place with their partner, but they've said yes under duress, or they've said yes because they feel pressured or manipulated or blackmailed or coerced. So that's really important that we need to teach our children. And the pressures that I think some of the young teens said about earlier about feeling pressured. It also doesn't take into account that trauma could be inflicted if you have agreed to consenting to something that you really didn't think you were consenting to, or if someone has taken advantage of you in any way. And I think that's really important. And it's really hard for young people to understand and to have that empathy. And that's what we try to do when we work with schools to educate about this. So if I'm suggesting that this method of teaching about consent is not good enough, let's have a look at what else is exposed to young people. How do they get their messages about healthy relationships and consent? Let's explore that further. So there's lots of things that are influencing young people today, and they've mentioned some of these. I'm just going to throw them out there. We've got social media, film, TV, songs, gaming. I'm going to put some up there. Social media is a huge influence amongst young people, which can be amazing. It can be a great way to connect. It can be a great way to find out about the world around them. Great educational tools to follow. But this is quite problematic if you're following, it depends who you're following, whether it's helpful and whether young people are getting great messages about consent and relationships. Also, our news feeds are built in a particular way that it shows us more of the same. So we can be creating echo chambers for ourselves. So let's look at some TV and film. Do they give really good messaging about relationships? What kind of relationships I want my kids to be experiencing? How about that rom-com that we all love and watch, where the guy has stalked the girl until the point that she has fallen madly in love and they live happily ever after? Is that the kind of relationship I want my kids to experience? Not really. I talk to young people about the film 365 Days. I've not seen it, but apparently they've all seen it. And it's a film where the guy has kidnapped the girl and said, in 365 days, I'm going to make you fall in love with me. And guess what? She does. And it's so romantic. I'm not saying not watch these. And I'm not saying, of course, these film and TV are over dramatized for a particular reason, right? But what I'm saying is, if this is where our young people are learning about relationships and about consent, is this helpful? And what can we do about it to counteract that? I'm going to put songs and gaming in the same kind of category. Objectification of women. Could that be problematic? And we're talking about mainstream songs, mainstream gaming that our young people enjoy playing. Adults enjoy playing on listening to these too. Porn. Porn is a really important thing to discuss, because actually the amount of young people who have seen hardcore explicit porn, and I'm not saying it could be accidentally, because it's so easily accessible, it's really problematic. And it's problematic because if this is a young person's sex education, how are they going to emulate that in their own relationships? I mean, I hope they don't. How is that? And it's not great for guys. Do they need to be that masculine kind of persona that's there in porn? And for the women as well, where things are being done to them. And we often see in porn violence being normalized, same in gaming, same in film, same in TV. Language is really important. The language that we use with our young people really helps shape perceptions and attitudes about sex, relationships. How about if you've been hearing in songs, you know you want it, and that whole objectification. And then we have the language that we use to be, I don't know, say you've always been heard, man up, or stop crying like a girl, or you're crying like a baby. That is going to make me feel, well, maybe I should be a particular kind of way as a man. Is that what I need to be like? And therefore, if I'm supposed to be the one who should not be expressing emotion, and if I do, I'm told I'm like a girl, how is that going to help in my relationships? And if we're talking about consent and wanting great communication to show that we can consent, well, if I've been told I shouldn't really be sharing emotion, how is that going to have a fallout? And it is problematic. Laws are great as well, because they really help shape our attitudes, and also our attitudes and values help shape and change laws. So we have the upskirting law. The upskirting bill that was passed has made it a criminal offence really recently, only in the last couple of years, where if you don't know what upskirting is, it's when you take a photo up someone's skirt, and apparently it used to be allowed to happen. Coercive control in 2015 became a criminal offence. Rape in a marriage only became criminalised in 1991. So I'm completely baffled by that. So laws can help shape attitudes, and we can, and our attitudes, excuse me, can help shape the laws. So what I wanted to do is try to create a picture where what are influencing our teens today and our kids today can be helpful in some ways, but can also be really unhelpful. And not only that, I'm just going to add this, many of these make violence seem normalized. Okay, it's there in film, it's there in porn, it's there in gaming. And if we want to address violence, sexual violence, and we want to reduce that as a culture, we've got to look at everything that our young people are surrounded by. And we as parents, and me as an educator and a parent, we can all do something to break that down. So we're getting somewhere. So I'm just going to move on, and I'm going to look at the term sexual violence. And when we go into schools, we ask young people, what do you understand by this term sexual violence? What do you understand by it? And we show them this umbrella, and we give them a clue, and we say it encompasses many different things. And they really understand that sexual violence could include sexual assault, could include rape, could include sexual abuse. But what they find a bit harder are the non-physical forms that still fit under this umbrella of sexual violence. So what I'll say to them, and which I can say to you this evening, is that any sexual violence is any unwanted sexual act or activity. And then what's even more helpful is that if we look at the term violence in terms of violations, how sexual violence is when somebody has been violated in a sexual way and it was unwanted. So that's when we can start to unpick some of the what young people might not even see under this banner as being linked. those things like a group chat, WhatsApp, talking about rating women. How about it could be catcalling, it could be any form of sexual harassment, stalking, although stalking is quite a severe form. Any other things could be sending nudes, and I think Mark is going to talk about that a little bit later on. And what I think is so important is for young people to see how these seemingly less harmful behaviours are intrinsically linked to the more severe forms. And it forms under the same banner, because if we allow these harmful behaviours to just go unchecked, because it's just normalised, it's just everyday occurrences, it happens all the time, and we feel like we can't do anything to change that, it can then lead into more severe forms of violence. So what I find really helpful is looking at all of these things in terms of a pyramid, where we have the harmful ideas and attitudes at the bottom. And if they go unchecked, it leads to harmful behaviours, which leads to violence. And I'm not saying that anyone who has ever told a misogynistic joke, or has used any sexist language, or told their son to man up, stop crying like a girl, is then going to contribute towards, is then going to become violent. But what I'm saying is the other way around, in that violence doesn't come from nowhere. And at the website, Everyone's Invited, if you've seen Soma Sarah speak, or if you read any of what she said, she talks about something called a rape culture. And what she is saying is that we have allowed, not you personally or me personally, but just we live in a culture that has normalized and trivialized some of these lower levels, and therefore we allow this kind of we allow it to lead into harmful behaviors, which leads to violence. So therefore we have to interrupt that. We want to interrupt that direction that pyramid is going, and we all can do that. And we all have a responsibility and an opportunity here. But just a couple of the other examples that I haven't really said. Ideas and attitudes could be, I don't know, a guy who has had lots of girlfriends. They're seen as conquests. They're seen as, when I asked a young audience this week, they said, oh yeah, they're seen as the geezer. And what's a girl seen as? Well, you may have heard the term slut shaming. That all forms under ideas and attitudes. Okay, ideas thinking that girls are seen as lesser than boys. Behaviors could be that unwanted touching, could be in a school setting, it could be anywhere. The cat calling, the wolf whistling, and they're just kind of accepted that this is everyday society. And then it could lead to more physical, more severe forms of violence. So what I want to just show you now is just some more examples. I'm just going to let you have a little read of what's up here. The top two are just examples that came from Everyone's Invited website. And I'll let you have a little read through. And the bottom two actually came from UK Feminista, which is a report that looked into sexism in schools back in 2017. So it's quite a while ago. So what I'm trying to say is that these things aren't new. These things have been happening over a long period of time. So it may take a long period of time to change, but that's okay. 16 to 25-year-olds are most at risk of experiencing sexual violence or assault, and they're most at risk of experiencing relationship abuse. So we have a responsibility and an opportunity to do something. And it can be put down that sexual assault could be just down to, oh, that was just not good sex, that was bad sex, or she wasn't that into it. So the way we want to teach young people is about having that enthusiasm, having that understanding of what consent might look like. And we need to be having those conversations with our children. Okay, what can we do? We can, first one I put down here is education. Let us all have a better understanding what sexual violence is, what relationship abuse is, what healthy relationships look like, so that when our kids come and ask us and want to talk to us, we feel equipped to be able to talk to them. a better understanding of what our kids are doing, where they're going, who they are going with. And that will help us to be able to open up these conversations, give them a space to be able to talk to us about things that are bothering them. We want to have a better education so that we can have less judgment, right? We don't want our kids to be scared to tell us what's going on if they're going to be told off, that they're worried that they're going to be told off. You know, oh my God, I can't tell my mum because she'll just kill me if she knows what I did with such and such and such and such. We have to create those spaces to allow our kids to be able to talk to us. Language, the language that we use, our kids are going to emulate that. So they're going to mirror our language. So if we need to be speaking the language that we want them to be speaking. So if we don't want them to tell those sexist jokes, we got to stop those ourselves. If we want to address gender stereotypes, because we know that it can lead to those harmful attitudes and ideas, which can lead to harmful behaviors and violence, we got to challenge those, and we've got to start with ourselves. Boys will be boys, you know, we're saying these to our boys, that's really doing our boys a disservice. What happens if they are not, our sons are not those boys that the society or culture has ingrained them that they should be? We need to be, we also need peer-on-peer support. And I think it was mentioned in the video just now about how powerful it is. As she said, one of the girls said, just one person saying something can make a difference. And that's what we hope to do. I mean, me, 40-year-old something, going to talk to young people about consent, I can go only so far. But what we can do is help our young people with the tools and equip them with the knowledge to be able to support each other. And we want to move away from like a call out culture where they're not going to go and seen as being grassing on their friend. We want them to have the confidence to be able to tell their friend if they are doing something that's inappropriate. You know what? That's not okay. Let's stop this group chat now. Let's stop acting in this way. It's just not okay. It just makes me feel uncomfortable. Talking about my sister, I would have got really mad. Those kind of things. And we need to have the confidence to be able to talk to our kids and to be able to make a difference and to know that we can make a difference. Confident to teach our kids that when we make mistakes, it's okay. Let's talk about it. Let's move on. Let's learn from them. And I hope that anyone who's come here tonight will have gained a little bit more confidence to be able to address these topics. That's what we really hope to have achieved. And we want to create this consent culture. We want to move away from a harmful culture that leads to violence, but we want to create a consent culture. And I'll come on to that in just 1 minute before I leave. And we also want to address consent in a much younger age. Okay, we can tell our kids from a really young age, you don't have to hug Aunt Mildred if you really don't want to. Yeah, you don't have to hold the hand of that girl in the playground if you really don't want to. Tell the person if they are touching you in an inappropriate way, you just don't feel comfortable. Let's start at a young age. Let's start creating that consent culture. And we want to be role models. Okay, so how do we do this? That's what we're doing. I'm just going to quickly whiz through how we're going to do this. Let's make ourselves available. Let's be available to our kids so that we can really hear from them, really hear. I know it's really difficult. We're all busy. We've got household chores and work and whatever else. How can we stop and really allow our children, give our children the space that they need to tell us how they're feeling, okay? And it can't just be just every now and again or when they're having trouble. We want to make it on a regular basis. So it's just part of our everyday family routine. And with that, let's create the spaces. So where could this take place? Take them out for a drive, go for a walk with the dog, take them for ice cream. I don't know, go play sport together. Just do something together that could then create that space to allow our kids to tell us if there's something up, how's things, have those open conversations. And if we're only talking to our children because they look distressed, then we may not get what we really want to hear. But if we try to start from a really young age to create those spaces, make ourselves available, it will really reap rewards for the future. And if you're sitting here thinking, I've got old teenage kids, it's never too late to start. So keep that going. Switch off those phones and tune in. I know how many of us, phone in hand, kids asking us a question. I'm like, I'm just completing my Ocado bill. I just got to reply to my email. we just got to do something else before speaking to our kids. I'm so guilty of that. But we've got to try and find those times when that phone is not, and that device is not with us, and we are with our kids, and vice versa. Kids are off their devices and they are with us as well. It's challenging, it's hard. And I want us to be role models for our kids. Yeah. So if we want them to behave in a particular way, we've got to do it ourselves. If we want them to talk the talk, to change their language, we've got to do it ourselves, because they look up to us and they will mirror our behavior. So before I finish, I just want to share with you this consent culture and link it back to the cup of tea. The cup of tea video that I said, core communication skills is important, but it's only one piece in the puzzle. Let's challenge those stereotypes. Let's make sure we have some good reporting systems, and I'm just going to end with that in a minute. Support our kids so we don't have that judgment if they want to come and talk to us when they are worried or concerned. And I want us to have a community where our children play an active role in supporting their peers and driving change, where parents feel confident, knowledgeable to address these issues with their children. And also teachers, we've got to work with our schools, we've got to support our teachers support us, we come together, and we also have great signposting systems. I'm just going to finish off by, of course, I work for Jewish Women's Aid. I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't share with you some survivor places to go. If anyone has been experienced by anything that we've said, in London, we can support girls as young as 14. And this is how you can access their support by client support. And of course, men can experience and boys can experience this too. So I've put up Mankind and Respect and Gallup for LGBTQ+. And there's one final thing, you may not be able to see it because it's underneath, it may be underneath your tab where you can see people. It's called The Mix, and it's a great website to share and to look at with your children to find out more. When I was a kid, when I wanted to find out more, I looked at magazines and Just 17 or whatever else. The Mix is a great place for young people to just read, find out about sex, drugs, alcohol in a really, really kid-friendly way. So thank you, and feel free to be in touch with me. There's my email there. And there'll be a chance for questions.
Thank you very much, Ilana. I really appreciate that really interesting talk. And I think obviously for every parent, you have to digest that and then think about how we can apply that to our individual children. And that is something that we will talk about a little bit later on. Just before I hand over to Mark Rogers, to Chief Inspector Mark Rogers, can I just remind everybody, if you do have any questions, please do post them on the chat or send them directly to Julia Alberger, and she will then be able to pose them to our panel at the end of Mark's presentation. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Mark Rogers. I have to say an enormous thank you to him. He is the Chief Inspector, has dedicated an enormous amount of time to the community of his own time, and the care and consideration that he's shown for us is greatly appreciated. And to Phil Maldazone, who's also on this call, thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, David. Thank you for those kind words. And Ilana, thank you for your presentation. Very, very, very good, and lots to think about there for parents. Parents, first of all, thank you for having me here tonight. Really pleased to be here. Really pleased to speak with you. I've only got a short slot tonight. I've got 10 minutes with you, and I'm going to talk to you about sexting, or another word you may understand it as is sending nude images. It's one of the biggest problems we're seeing across all schools in the UK at the moment. So I thought it's a really good opportunity just to upskill parents around some of the risks and some of the issues around sexting, so you know what to look out for and what to do. I'm going to try and share my screen with you now. We don't use Zoom in the Met Police, we use Microsoft Teams, so I'm not very good at it, so just bear with me. See if I can do it. Has it? Let's try again. Has my screen shared? Can anyone tell me? No. Okay.
Mark, would you like me to run your presentation for you?
Yeah, I'm having problems trying to share.
This is why we have teenagers, Mark.
Yeah, I know. I might have to get my wife to help me.
There you go. Now just turn your camera back on. You're good.
It's shared.
Brilliant. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm just going to talk to you a little about what sexting is, or sharing of nude images. Basically, what it is where you share or send a sexually suggestive text message via your phone or by some kind of digital device. Sexting is also known as sending nude images or sending semi-nude images via text or instant messaging devices or social media. The reason why I'm talking to you about this tonight is because children are doing this on a regular basis. It is very common in schools, and it's causing us huge problems as law enforcement agencies, but at the same time, it's placing children at significant risk of potentially exploitation and blackmail. And when children send these nude images or sexually suggestive text messages, these will go viral on the internet. And at this point, when they go viral, they cannot be controlled. And once that image is sent by your child, it can end up anywhere in the world, on any internet site, or in the hands of any paedophile throughout the world. And it's very hard for law enforcement agencies to draw them back and get them deleted from the web. And it's at that point, when these images are sent viral, children will tend to be blackmailed or bullied. One thing that parents don't realise, and a lot of my police officers don't realise as well, is that if you send an indecent image, or a child sends an indecent image of themselves, it can identify your home address of where you live. So at that point, that child could potentially be a victim of further crime, be targeted for violence, be targeted for exploitation. And one of the key things in relation to sending images, in particular indecent images of children, if your children do it, it can be classified as a criminal offence, and your child could ultimately end up with a criminal conviction. However, that is the last thing we want to do. So that is hence the reason I'm here tonight, just to tell you a little bit about sexting, in particular sending nude images, and about what you can do to stop them from taking place. Why do children do this? I think we all ask ourselves, because when we were younger, when I was certainly younger, they didn't have mobile phones, and I dare say a lot of the parents here, we never had mobile phones with cameras on. And it's amazing how the world has come on and developed significantly. So why do they share images, and why do they do it? First of all, some of them do it because they want to share images of themselves amongst friends, because social media creates that relaxed sense of society. There may be a romantic attraction there between both parties, or they're trying to build that relationship, so they may send images of themselves, and they may try to seek attention. But I think one of the key points around images is sending indecent images is that children are pressurized into doing it. We see so much of this within our day-to-day basis. We see bullying within the school place, peer pressure within the schools, and sometimes we see children that have been criminally exploited to send these images. And in cases, children are blackmailed to send these images over. And when a child sometimes sends an image, that person who has that indecent image of the child will use that indecent image to blackmail that child further to commit various criminal offences. And some children send indecent images because it's a safe alternative to having a sexual relationship. I'll give you some stats around indecent images, and it's really quite worrying. And I was researching this in preparation for this presentation. And it says 1 in 4 adolescent children in the UK have sent a nude picture of themselves or herself through electronic means. That's really worrying. Me as a parent, I have 2 young girls myself. and I'm petrified of this, and I will be having conversations when they're old enough to understand. And it says 48% of all teenagers in the UK have actually received some kind of sexually suggestive message via their mobile phone or digital media device. Boys are more likely to request that image or that sexual text message. And teenagers or young children that do send these indecent images of themselves are more likely to become sexually active in a younger age. And one thing I want to say, parents, here is that I don't want you to walk out of this presentation feeling petrified, and I don't want you to walk away and confiscate all mobile phones from your children. That is not the case. The best way to deal with this is by having those conversations with them around the risks around sending indecent images and the importance of children understanding that it's not the thing to do. Say no. It's a bit like that Stranger thing, that the old adverts when you used to get on the television when the man will pull up with the sweets to the children. Do you want to get in my car? Just say no. It's very much that sort of picture I would like to create in your heads. If children get asked to send an indecent image, they've got to say no. They've got to understand around the risks. I'll just talk briefly around the law around it as well, because this is really crucial as parents, that you need to understand what the law is around indecent images. It's worth pointing out that sending indecent images via a mobile phone or by video to another person where that indecent image or that sexually suggestive image is of a child under the age of 18 is a criminal offence. To download an indecent image of a child and store it on your mobile device is a criminal offence. And an adult sexually communicating with a child under the age of 16 is a criminal offence. However, it's worth noting that we don't, as the police, we don't want to criminalise these children unless there is a real need for it, i.e. there's some really aggravating factors. We want to educate children around this. We want to work with partners to safeguard children. And one of the best ways to do this is by holding presentations like this, so you as parents can understand the risks around indecent images and the risks associated to them. How are we together going to prevent this from taking place? And one of the best ways of doing it is by me speaking to you parents, so you understand what the risks associated in relation to sending images are. All parents here today on this virtual room, and I think it's fantastic that so many of you have dialed in to listen to this presentation, all have a crucial role in prevention and preventing this crime type from taking place and safeguarding your children from this risk that is out there. And one of the best ways to do it is by being confident around your children, speaking with your children, and supporting your children to make those right decisions. Because if you do this, you really act as a key protective factor. So it's about being a confident, authoritative parent that supports them, not laying down the law, confiscating the mobile phones, banning them from social media. That's not the answer here. It's about supporting them, having those conversations with them, and really educating them on what a healthy relationship is, and understanding what a healthy relationship is, and understanding what is right and what is wrong when it becomes to having relationships with opposite sexes. And you as parents, including myself as parents, David as a grandfather, we all have to take some personal responsibility to understand some of the associated risks that is out there in relation to social media, digital devices, and we must be able to spot some of the warning signs that are out there. And we as all parents must know where to go for help. If we think our child has been a victim of blackmail, has sent some indecent images, we've got to know where to go for help to try and support our children. Because the last thing we want is our children suffering when they've been blackmailed to send images over, or they've made a mistake and they've sent that image. We've got to be there to support them, to prevent it from happening again. And I'll just talk to you briefly about some of the cases we've encountered. We've had young children at various schools in the UK who have sent images of themselves, semi-nude or nude images, completely innocent, thinking it's a fun thing to do. But when these images get sent, they do get picked up by internet servers such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. And they do get reported to law enforcement agencies because there are statutory reporting guidelines that have to take place. Okay, we may not arrest those children because it is innocent and it can be dealt with in education settings. However, because it's been reported, because it's been recorded, there is a record of these crime types. And therefore, some children who've gone to travel to America have been stopped from going to America because the Americans will have access to all of our databases and they do checks on people. And if they've come to attention, even though they've not been prosecuted and it's been dealt with in an education way, because it's been recorded on police systems and police indices, they've stopped children from entering into the United States. So it's just something to be aware of, parents. And then ultimately, we've all got to think safeguarding. Safeguarding, as I've said on previous presentations, is everyone's business. Every one of us here in this building has a role to raising awareness. Children are vulnerable because they're children. It doesn't matter what culture they are, what ethnicity, religion, or gender they are. They can be vulnerable from any background. So it's of utmost importance as parents, we do whatever we can to safeguard them. And we always upskill ourselves. So we're on that front foot to look out for our children. And children will be targeted from various offenders in the UK, abroad, male or female, young or old. And very often some of these offenders don't have any offending history. And as I've said earlier, young people, in particular children who send images themselves, may become offenders and may be prosecuted. So parents, it's just a little bit of a plea from me. I've only had a very short input tonight around indecent images or sexting, but please just go away, research it on the internet so you have an understanding of it. You can upskill yourself on it and you could have those conversations with your children. If you can take away one message from me tonight is go and have a chat with your children and tell them, do not send indecent images of yourselves. If someone asks you, tell us, do not send those images. That's it from me, parents, and I'm sure there'll be some questions after, but I have a small presentation here and I can send it out. I'll get David to send it out of the Pages team so you've got it so you can have an understanding. But there's some really good websites out there around in relation to crime prevention, but please just upskill yourself and just try and stay on the front foot. Thank you. That's me, David. I'm done.
Thank you, Mark. It's Julia. Thanks very much. I've got a couple of questions that have come through to me. The first one is from somebody who is actually watching with her son and is talking about if we're not educating our boys properly, then how can we expect this to go away? Ilana, maybe you could just highlight the sort of work that we are doing with boys and what we expect.
Hi there, thank you. It's really a challenge. How do we go into schools to talk about all these issues without the boys feeling that they are being attacked, so therefore they have to get on the defensive, and that we are not accusing them of potentially doing something that they would never even have it in their psyche to do. So that's really a challenge. So I'd say a couple of things. When we talk today about culture and we wanted to have a cultural change, we are not singling out any individuals. We're looking at a culture, and therefore we could all be affected. So that's boys included, and we can all be part of the solution. So I'd say to boys, absolutely, they could experience sexual harassment. Absolutely, they could experience unwanted behaviors that they did not want, and have, in a way, their own challenges to reporting that kind of behavior. When we talked about gender stereotypes, there's a huge barrier of if a guy may call out that they didn't like that unwanted touching, how could they be perceived by their peers, which could be a barrier to stop them from saying something in the first place. Also, we could talk about what can you do if you see it? If you see it amongst your friendship groups, how can you help support and stop and prevent harmful behaviors with your friends. So that's quite challenging, but it's also, we need, I mean, you may have seen in social media this whole term male allies, but it's absolutely true. We need boys talking to other boys about how harmful behaviors and where can that lead to. And then also the gender stereotypes and how that can impact their own relationships. So there's a pressure amongst young boys to want to have sex, to want to have physical. What, you had the whole weekend with your girlfriend, you didn't do anything? What's the matter with you? You're such a wimp. And there's a pressure among guys, and I think it's an acknowledgement that there's a pressure on boys to want to have sex. And what happens if that's not you? And so it is a challenge, and therefore we need to meet young people where they are at, and that is an absolute priority of mine over the coming year. And I feel that any parent with sons who is on the Zoom will realize that boys are really concerned that they are going to, they don't know how to talk to girls because they worried that they're going to be accused of something. So I acknowledge that that's a general concern. And if we can start opening up our conversations with our young people, teaching them what consent looks like, what healthy relationships look like, how to be respectful in our when we communicate with others, then hopefully we can break this down.
Thanks, Alana. And for Mark, there's been a question that says, if someone is coerced through peer pressure into sending a nude, is that illegal? And therefore, are they going to get a criminal record? And does that prevent young people then from actually coming forward and talking to the police? Because of they might be scared.
No. If they're coerced into sending an image, this is where we have in London a guidance document called the Child Exploitation Protocol, and there's clear guidance around children that are exploited or coerced into sending images. And it's worth pointing out we are releasing a version to the Jewish schools very shortly. And if a child is coerced, the first thing that child should really do is speak out. Go to the school safeguarding lead to report it. And once they've raised their concerns to the safeguarding lead, there's a set process that will take place to safeguard that child. That child will not be prosecuted if they've been coerced into sending it at all. And the main aim around that child will be to safeguard that child, give that child some education, but ultimately look at the person as well who has coerced that child. Is there any criminal element in there, blackmailing, etc., or bullying, or inappropriate behavior that can be dealt with? But yeah, great. And that's yeah. So please don't be afraid to speak out if they've been coerced.
Thanks, Mark. Right, over to you, David.
Thank you very much indeed. I found that, and I'm sure everyone else is, enormously interesting. I want to share with you a conversation that I had a while ago, actually, with a group of boys. And I said to them, imagine that one of you was speaking to your friends, and you told your friends, I've got a new girlfriend. And all the boys started laughing to one another and said, yeah, that's great. And then one of them says, who is it? He says, actually, it's your sister. And you see the boy go pale because the thought of this guy going out with his sister is something that he wasn't willing to contemplate. Just that description, I think, encapsulates the fact that, unfortunately, the relationships that we have too often are very, very negative. And it is, as I said at the beginning, it is a culture that we have to smash. It is something that we have to affect real change if we want to see our children grow up in the kind of society that actually we all want to espouse and we all want to see for our future. I would say to you, if I may, a few key messages that I have pulled out from this session. The first one is that this is a danger to everybody. I cannot emphasize this enough. I've had conversations with schools in Stamford Hill. I've had conversations with schools in literally every segment of our community where this is a problem and where we need to realize that we have got to educate our children on how to behave and educate our children in how to defend and be aware of potential problems. And I want us to understand that in some regards, the more protected the environment that we bring up our children, the greater the danger of them slipping and sliding. And I'll explain to you what I mean. If we bring up a child to tell that child, you are never allowed to hold a boy's hand, which is obviously very much a culture within a lot of the Orthodox community. And then that girl goes and holds a boy's hand. That girl, unfortunately, sometimes feels that's it. They have done everything wrong that they could possibly do. And there's no coming back from that. And then the soap is so slippery between that and the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. And we know of cases of girls that have been groomed by the fact that they had one picture that was taken of them was not acceptable, and it got worse and worse. So it is very much about the culture and understanding the education of the children that is at the core of this. And for us as parents, I think first and foremost is that we create a safe space for our children to speak to us. And that safe space needs to be, number one, that they know that they can tell you whatever they want to tell you without you judging them. There's no point as soon as they start the conversation with you crying and screaming, because they will never have another conversation with you. Furthermore, it just doesn't help if you're listening to them whilst checking your phone's messages. That's not having a communication with your child. And I know how difficult it is. And you turn off your phone, but actually you don't really turn off your phone, because all you do is turn off the screen and then something pops up. And of course you're listening to your child, because your child is the most important thing in your life. But your friend has sent you a really funny WhatsApp message. You just need to send a smiley face back to. That smiley face is destroying the relationship between you and your child. So we have to focus, we have to give a really safe environment, and we have to ensure that they can communicate to you their concerns. But at the same time, and I want this to be the most important message, our duty is to communicate to them our concerns and our messages. You have got to fight back. And it's not just me or you or you or you, it is all of us together. We have got to create a tsunami that will overcome the wave that is coming from our social media. We have got to be the ones to take over the agenda of what our children are taught. We have got to be the ones to determine how our children conduct themselves and what moral values they are given. So in essence, what we are saying to you this evening is, please let this be a collaborative opportunity, not just for one or the other, but literally the power of partnerships, the power of each and every one of us getting together and saying, we are going to affect change in our society. I want you to know that it has not just been the meeting with his parents that is part of that program. We have met with the head teachers of all of the secondary schools. They are working together to ensure that there is a consistent message which is given to our children. And it cannot be a one-off. It can't be that we sit down with them because, you know what, it's a great idea and we have a chat with them tomorrow and then that's it, it's forgotten about because I've had the chat. And let's be honest about it, the chat is always uncomfortable. It's that time that we don't want to spend with the kids. But that chat is what is going to ensure that our children behave in the way that we want. I don't want it to be from the threat that you send a picture, you're going to end up in prison or you're not going to be able to go to America. And I don't want it to be from the fear that you can't walk down the street without somebody jumping on top of you. But it has to be from the appreciation and understanding that actually we have to show respect. We have to give space to each individual. We have to show that we understand and appreciate the rights of each individual and that we cannot foist our opinions, our beliefs, and certainly not our physicalities and abuse on another person. We wouldn't allow that from anyone else. I would like to end with, and I just want to add one other point, but I'll end with a story. When I was a head teacher, I had a group of students who were really horrifically behaved. And I did something I'd never done before. I've often called a parent in and spoken to them. But I called all the parents in. And in fact, one of my members of staff said to me, goes, David, you're mad. He said, it just will not work. Do not do this. And I had all the parents sitting over there and they sat in a circle. And at the beginning, I started speaking. And one of the parents said to me, really aggressively, can you explain to me why we're all over here? And I turned around and I said, look, I want you to understand, we have a real problem with the behavior of your children because as a group, they are behaving in an unacceptable manner. And I really expected pushback from the parents. And one of the parents puts his hand up and goes, Rob Omar, I want to tell you something. This is not your problem. This is our problem. We will not allow it to continue. And they got together and the rest of the meeting was literally me telling them to calm down because they were so vociferous on what they were going to tell their children. The next day, the kids came into school and one at a time, they went, what did you just do? You can't get all our parents together. That's just not right. So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we've got all the parents together. We have got you all sitting in a room, and I believe almost 200 of us, we can affect a change in our society and in our community. We have to do it. We have to fight back, and we look to you in order to be able to assist us in this. I'm just going to hand over now for just 20 seconds to Caroline, who's going to show you a little video, and then I'm going to end off with a short, brief message from Pages. I'm actually going to pause it there because I don't think that we have the sound, so I apologize for that. But I would like to just share with you a brief thought. The fact of the matter is that this coming weekend, on Sunday and Monday, the 13th and 14th of June, Pages is actually going to be running a match funding campaign. I apologize for doing a brief appeal, but the reality is this has been a difficult year. I know it's been a difficult year for schools, and it's certainly been a difficult year for Pages in many regards, challenging in many, many different ways, but that includes the funding and being able to try and deliver the programs that we are doing and want to continue to be able to do. So I would just like to request of you, if you do not mind, that this coming weekend, if you do see, and I very much hope you will see, a message from us, that you click on it, join our page, join our site, and help us to help you to continue to deliver an outstanding education to our children. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and I hope you have a very pleasant night. Thank you.